So you are a big fan of The Hobbit. So what was it like to be asked to play an elf in this film?
It was quite literally a dream come true. And I don't mean that I'd been pining to play an elf, but I had dreamed about being an elf when I was a little girl. And then when Lord of the Rings came out, I was, of course, enamored with the elves, and I was like, oh man, how cool would that be? And then when I started working on Lost, I met Peter Jackson in my first year of working on Lost. We met at the Golden Globes. And he said to me that year, he said, if I had met you or if I had known about you before I did Lord of the Rings, I would have cast you as an elf. And I was like, oh, don't tell me that, because I had no idea that there was going to be this other, group of films coming along. And so when he called me to ask me to be an elf in The Hobbit, I was like, oh, this is pretty much a dream come true.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
Now, Toriel is a new character for the film. How is she different from the other elves?
Yeah, Tauriel is a common elf, and we've not actually met a common elf in these films yet, including Lord of the Rings. We've only met high elves, so essentially elf royalty. And the elf royalty are everything that you have seen the incredible women who have, and men,
Yes.
Orlando, who have performed before me. They personified everything that is a high elf. So it was sort of my job to introduce the world to a common elf and a common sylvan elf, which sylvan elves are, in Tolkien's words, they're less wise and more dangerous than the other elves. So Tauriel is a dangerous elf. She is very kick-ass. She's the head of the Sylvan Guard, so she is a skilled warrior. She uses 2 daggers, a bow and arrow, and her hands when need be. Elves are good at improvising in battle if they have to. And she's young. She's very young. She's only 300 years old.
Oh.
It's just a baby. And so she's got a little bit of a sort of reckless side. She bulks authority a little bit more than you'd ordinarily see in a more mature elf. And she's naive to the world. She has been locked away in her realm for her entire life. She's never been allowed to venture outside of it. And so in these films, it's going to be fun to see her sort of come, bloom into a more mature elf as she explores the world and meets new people and creatures.
Now, with her being such a badass kick-ass, was there a lot of training that you went through or had to go through in order to develop the character?
Yeah, there was an extensive amount of training. It was the hardest, it was the greatest challenge I've ever had as a performer to do this role. There was stunt training, there was movement training, there was weapons training, there was dialect training, there was language training, and did I miss one? That was it. But the movement training was particularly fascinating because, of course, you kind of expect to be trained on weapons. Not everyone can use a weapon. You expect to be trained in a language. Not everyone can speak Elvish and accents and whatnot. But to be trained how to move, I mean, how to turn your head, how to lift your arm, how to walk down a set of stairs. I felt like I was in reform school. like when you're a little girl and they send you to schools and put books on your head, and it was fascinating.
That's great. Now, this being such a monumental production, was there a certain camaraderie that you felt with the other actors filming this?
I think that's it's an interesting question for me particularly because I spent 6 years sequestered on a very small island with a cast of about 10 people that remained. So the level of intimacy that was developed over those 6 years will probably never be topped in any other job I ever do. I actually enjoy film because it's a little bit less intense, and the connection you make is beautiful, but it's a little bit more of like a burst. It's like a burst of energy, and you can feed off of each other's creative energy, and then you can move through that and keep going. And I actually really like that. The men on this film, of course, I was surrounded by men all the time. Lucky me. Were wonderful, and they treated me, I mean, I really sort of felt like I was a bit spoiled, like I was sort of the princess amongst them. They were so good to me. They were chivalrous and charming and flirtatious and all the things a woman wants to be surrounded with, good-looking men flirting with her all day. It's great. It was a wonderful experience.
Oh, that's great. Now, do you find that in filming this that you have a deeper understanding of the actual books or book, any particular book?
Yeah,
of The Hobbit?
I didn't read this. I had been a fan of The Hobbit. I'd been a fan of the Rings trilogy before the films ever came out. But I'd never read the Silmarillion. And my father had always said, trust me, it's the best one. And I'd always sort of, once I got past that sweet spot, that sort of age where children are usually introduced to Tolkien and fall in love with him, I hadn't picked them up again. I still held them in very high regard. But my father had always said, trust me, you really should read the Silmarillion. It's the best book. And so when I was in hair and makeup for 2 hours every morning, I would sit and read the Silmarillion. And he was absolutely right. As an adult, it's the most enchanting of all of the books. And particularly when I was playing an elf, it really impacted me to understand. I didn't understand the origins of elves. I didn't understand where all these people had come from or how Middle-earth came to be. And to get that insight and that history was so enchanting and really helped bring me into the world.